Not to mince words, but film directing is a difficult line of work. Whilst internet ghouls such as ourselves make bread and butter from dunking on disastrous directors, the fact is that sometimes the talents of even the most dismal helmet yield great results. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, and here are 10 great films from bad directors. Number 10, The Sixth Sense by M. Night Shyamalan. Okay, fair enough, this one's a little tenuous. M. Night Shyamalan can't be considered a truly bad director, hence the high placement on this list. But measuring up the average quality of his filmography does not yield flattering results. Responsible for total turkeys like The Last Airbender, Shyamalan's cinematic output has statistically been more negative than positive. With that in mind, we posit that The Sixth Sense still stands head and shoulders above the rest of his work. It's easy to forget the sheer impact this film had at the time of its release, netting several coveted award nominations such as the Academy's Best Picture and Best Director categories. Not only did The Sixth Sense sport an excellent script, brilliant direction and tense atmosphere, but it also gave us one of the greatest plot twists in cinematic history, making Shyamalan a household name practically overnight. There were even some claiming him to be the next Steven Spielberg, this being long before the director ran his plot twist trope deep into the ground. Over 20 years later, it's still by far his best movie. Number 9, Pretty Woman by Gary Marshall. Despite receiving mixed reviews at the time of its release, Pretty Woman has unquestionably reached classic status over the years. Telling the tale of charming sex worker Vivian and her corporate client Edward, the plot follows their descent into mutual love. Pretty Woman is a joyful tale of good chemistry, good humour and learning to trust those close to you. As retold in Netflix's brilliant documentary series The Movies That Made Us, 3000, as it was originally titled, was meant to have a much darker, more realistic tone. Had it not been for the inexperience of director Gary Marshall, as well as his blatant disregard for the script, this is a film we would have gotten. Marshall opted to record several takes of each scene with wildly different tones in each, and also let lead actors Richard Gere and Julia Roberts simply improvise many of their scenes. This risky maneuver paid off in dividends, as letting the lead's natural chemistry speak for itself is arguably what made the film so great. Its romantic conclusion was all the more satisfying when the characters themselves were given the breathing room to endear themselves to the audience, and for that, we have Marshall to thank. Number 8, Star Wars Episode V: The Empire Strikes Back by Irvin Kershner. Widely regarded as one of the best Star Wars films ever made, even the best by some, it's easy to forget that our second foray into a galaxy far, far away wasn't actually helmed by creator George Lucas. Following on from the events of A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back continues the story of the Rebel Alliance and their attempts to undermine the Galactic Empire. Along the way, Luke trains with Master Yoda, discovers the truth about Daddy Vader, and loses an entire limb in a lightsaber duel with said father. Praised for its incredible action set pieces and overall darker tone, The Empire Strikes Back remains a firm favourite among Star Wars aficionados and casual fans to this very day. Director Irvin Kershner's other work? Not so much. The Barbra Streisand starring stinker Up the Sandbox and the disappointing RoboCop 2 both spring to mind when examining Kershner's very mixed filmography. Whilst 007 spoof Never Say Never Again could be considered something of a cult classic, this wasn't due to Kershner's directing abilities, and The Empire Strikes Back remains his greatest ever effort behind the camera. Number 7, Event Horizon by Paul W.S. Anderson. Perhaps best known these days for his mixed bag of a Resident Evil franchise, Paul W.S. Anderson is a bad director who can at least be said to make some really fun movies. The first Alien vs Predator is a campy action horror that deserves way more praise than it gets, and 1994's Shopping was surprisingly slick for a directorial debut. Far and away, the director's best work was 1997's Event Horizon, a sci-fi horror that went massively underappreciated upon release. Event Horizon has grown beyond a cult film into a bona fide sci-fi horror classic. Concerning a rescue crew sent to investigate the reappearance of an experimental warp ship, the situation aboard the Event Horizon quickly goes south as the crew succumb to terror, madness, and perhaps the trappings of hell itself. Also, out of character for Anderson, the film doesn't feature a single scene of Mila Jovovich naked. Very strange. A somewhat typical ghost ship story coloured with tinges of cosmic horror, Event Horizon was rightfully reassessed as a flawed masterpiece in the years since its home video release. Anderson supports this view, saying he was immensely proud of the work he and the crew put in, and that the film didn't get a fair shake at its initial debut. Number 6. The Mummy by Stephen Sommers. A childhood classic for many and an awakening for bisexuals the world over, 1999's The Mummy was a swashbuckling take on the classic Universal monster property that managed to reinvigorate the action-adventure genre at the time. Following the world's greatest librarian, Evie, as she enlists the help of tomb-raiding stallion Rick O'Connell to find the lost fortune of Hamunaptra, the group instead awaken a cursed mummy by the name of Imhotep. Now faced with a world-ending magical threat, the group teams up with a group of ancient Egyptian warriors to slay the monster and end the curse once and for all. The Mummy is high on the list of greatest films ever for 90s kids, and we have director Stephen Sommers to thank for that. Much like Paul W.S. Anderson, Sommers makes some really fun movies. Deep Rising and Van Helsing are low-key cult classics in their own right, but none of his work has ever reached the heights of this Brendan literal Angel Fraser vehicle. Sommers doesn't attempt anything too flashy with The Mummy, instead letting the fun script and excellent cast do the heavy lifting. This isn't to say his work was complacent, as oftentimes it's very difficult for directors to step back and let their films breathe as Sommers did here. Number 5. Donnie Darko by Richard Kelly. Donnie Darko was a critical and cult hit for the ages, launching the career of star Jake Gyllenhaal and convincing an entire generation of edgy teenage cinema goers they were properly like so intellectual dude. Following troubled teen Donnie as he witnesses visions of his death, a cursed rabbit with apocalyptic messages, and commitment to various crimes while sleepwalking, the film gives little away, instead encouraging the viewer to seek out their own answers as well as rewarding repeat viewings. On a first watch, this all seemed like it was guided by the careful hands of a true film auteur. Richard Kelly's intense and abstract directorial style appeared to be responsible for the arguable masterpiece we all ended up watching, but to our disappointment, this was not the case. We've discussed this here before, how it was actually studio interference that crafted the original cut of Donnie Darko into the excellent film we all loved. But it was mainly Kelly's follow-up efforts that exposed the director as a bit of a hack. Southland Tales was a confusing mess that seemed to be trying to one-up Darko as being weird for weirdness' sake, and The Box was a tedious Twilight Zone adaptation that didn't set any worlds on fire. At least we'll always have Gary Jules's Mad World. Number 4. Speed by Jan de Bont. The most 90s thriller to ever thrill in the 90s, this Keanu Reeves action vehicle is a much beloved relic of late-century action cinema. Speed follows maverick cop Jack Traven as he boards a speeding LA bus that will explode if it goes below 50 miles per hour. Featuring excellent performances from everyone involved, particularly Dennis Hopper as the unhinged terrorist responsible, Speed blew up at the box office, grossing nearly 10 times its original budget. It did well critically too, even netting a couple of Oscar nods for its trouble. The film's impact has seen it lovingly parodied in everything from Robot Chicken to Father Ted, which makes you think the director of the work must be a real talent, no? This was actually Helmut Jan de Bont's directorial debut. No small feat given the film's runaway success, and should have charted an excellent career for the young Dutch director. Alas, de Bont never helmed anything of note ever again, returning for the much lampooned Speed 2 Cruise Control, the limp 1999 remake of The Haunting, and the disappointing Tomb Raider Cradle of Life sequel. Sometimes beginner's luck really counts for a lot, and this appears to be the case here. Number 3. Independence Day by Roland Emmerich. During the late 90s, two genres reigned supreme, the disaster movie and the sci-fi action movie. In 1996, Roland Emmerich blew the doors off both genres with Independence Day. Set on present-day Earth as the world is devastated by a highly advanced and hostile alien race, we follow humanity banding together to destroy the alien threat. To say Independence Day was epic would be an understatement. Never before had audiences ever seen action set pieces of this scale, with the World Monument's destruction scene being both terrifying at the time and utterly iconic. What's more, we had an excellent cast of human interest characters to keep the simple plot moving forward, particularly Will Smith, Captain Hiller, Jeff Goldblum's quirky scientist, and Bill Pullman as the greatest big-screen US president we've ever seen. The Independence Day speech scene is simply chef's kiss. What makes this classic bit of action cinema all the more intriguing is that director Roland Emmerich never got close to repeating his success. Despite his name becoming a byword for big-budget disaster movies, most of his filmography is sadly lacking. His Godzilla remake was universally panned, nobody on Earth saw Anonymous, and his most recent effort, Moonfall, has been lampooned across the whole internet as an utterly silly affair. Even 2004's The Day After Tomorrow, which is widely accepted as an okay movie, failed to create that perfect marriage of character, story, and spectacle he reached with Independence Day. And the less said about its sequel resurgence, the better. Number 2, Darur by Uwe Boll. Do not wash out your ears, do not consult a doctor, you did in fact hear me correctly. Legendary Turkey Uwe Boll actually has a decent film to his name. The German director is infamous for his long line of terrible video game adaptations. Not satisfied with ruthlessly butchering games that showed narrative promise, Boll also had a tumultuous relationship with his critics, regularly calling them out on Twitter, blog posts, and challenging them to literal boxing matches. Despite being a far better boxer than he is a filmmaker, Boll has bravely forged on with his chosen career. Likely through the laws of averages rather than a sudden burgeoning talent, Boll managed to create Darur in 2009. When a talentless exploitative filmmaker like Boll decides to helm a biographical piece about real-life conflict, alarm bells start to ring. Thankfully, Darur is a decent movie that handles its sensitive subject matter pretty well. To say it's a masterpiece would be a huge stretch, but considering the bar is at the Earth's core when it comes to Uwe Boll movies, this is actually quite impressive. Both Billy Zane and Edward Furlong are also on point as the movie's leads, and Amnesty International even reported being impressed by the film's quality and credibility. Unfortunately, this film was released back in 2009, an interim in which Boll had managed to helm a whopping 13 stinkers since then, truly obliterating any good faith this work gave his directorial abilities. Number 1, The Room by Tommy Wiseau. Could it really have been anyone else? Tommy Wiseau's unhinged melodrama is commonly cited as the Citizen Kane of bad movies. So utterly detached from reality is Wiseau's vision, it regularly feels like a work cobbled together from an AI forced to watch 10,000 hours of Hallmark romance films. Serving as the film's writer, director, producer, and lead actor, Tommy himself seems to be a singularly gifted filmmaker in the area of bad movies. Plotlines appear then vanish into thin air, the camera work sometimes looks out of focus, the script is littered with non-sequiturs, and everyone's line delivery feels like it was beamed directly out of the actors' mouths by an alien force. And yet, truly, The Room is a great film. It's great for all the wrong reasons, but great nonetheless, enchanting viewers the world over and often selling out cinemas re-screening the film. The Room has captured hearts all over the world based purely on its demented execution, plastic spoons and all. There is absolutely no doubt that no one but Tommy Wiseau could have made a film this entertaining, intentionally or unintentionally.